Hello everyone, thank you so much for coming today to see Yvette Appleby talk about her practice. If you would like to ask any questions or make any comments, please use the chat feature and make sure to click panelists and attendees. Or if you want to be anonymous, please click the Q&A feature and it will go directly to me. I'll say a little bit about her. So Yvette primarily uses found objects and works in multimedia, creating scenes and dioramas that have a surreal quality. During the last 12 months, she has done more two-dimensional pieces using acrylic and pen on paper and canvas. She's always been interested in conveying a feeling, sometimes of unease, and try to produce pieces that the onlooker needs to decipher or unravel. She's interested in surrealism and objects out of their normally perceived place. And I'll pass it over to you now.
Right. Thanks, Kirsty, and thank you for letting me talk about my work and the Human Mind exhibition, which has been really interesting. As Kirsty said, I am interested in many things and use many resources to achieve my work, and it's changed over the years, depending on where I am, who I'm with, what work I've done. And I think as I go through the slides, it will show a progression of what's influenced me really and how I've changed in the way I work. So I grew up in a city, lived in a city, worked in a city for most of my life until about 12 years ago when I moved to a semi-rural place in Shropshire. So I was really interested in it to start with in urban images, and working full time, I didn't have a great deal of time to do complex things, but I used a lot of printmaking and digital images, particularly monoprints. These are two that I did, and I love monoprints because I like being a bit random. I work randomly and organically generally, and so you can just, you know, ink up a plate, put the paper on top, and draw at the back on the back in reverse. And always remember that it is in reverse if you're going to put writing on, like I did on this one, which was a combination of decals and monoprints. And it's called the loneliness of the long distance sitter, because I had this fascination with things happening through windows that you couldn't see. So I did rooms with people in, and my son was the sort of model for that. He was the only one available for a lot of my work when I lived in Birmingham. And this was a particular, it's a digital image I used because of a certain incident. My son was beaten up. I was so shocked and emotional about the whole thing, I just had to do something. And I wanted a powerful image, and I wanted to write underneath what exactly had happened. He'd done nothing really, he was just standing there. And that's actually the photograph that the police took of his injuries. And this is an example of a decal again, where I took a photograph of my terraced house in Birmingham and my son's girlfriend, who's now his wife. And I put them on the glass of a box frame so that you could look through the decals to a monoprint behind. And that's actually called No Balcony for Juliet. And that's the sort of thing I did for quite a few years. And I used to use Paint Shop Pro a lot. I used to manipulate digital images, but generally with an urban feel to them. So when I first came over to Shropshire, one of the first things I bought at a car boot sale, which is where I find a lot of my found objects are found at car boots, flea markets and auctions. And I love things that have been used, and I love toys that have a history. I use lots of things, but the mannequins was quite a few actually at this car boot. I thought they were quite beautiful in their form. And I did work for 11 years in an operating theatre, so I've got quite an interest as well in biology and anatomy. And I thought I'd combine the two and decorate the mannequins. And Sharpies are ideal for that because it suits the surface really well, and the colours are really good, and you can manipulate them with methylated spirits. Works really well. That particular one was a commission for a hairdresser's called the Devil's Haircut. This one was actually had to be anatomically correct because it was for a physiotherapist who saw my work and thought it would work really well in her studio. And then this one was she's called Venus in Fishnets. She's actually got legs, but I didn't take the whole thing. And whilst I wanted to incorporate the biology of it and the anatomy of it, I also wanted to make it with everything that you see in it to do with the woman, really. And on the back are decals of famous and infamous women from history. She's even got Adam's rib in there. I did quite a few of these mannequins, and I enjoyed the fact that you could start at one end and finish at the other. I never planned anything that went on them, because I don't plan really, apart from the anatomically correct one, which I had to work from a book of anatomy, obviously. So I'm also interested in faith and fantasy, and anything uncanny or macabre or ghostly, myths and legends too. And these two skulls were done, I did quite a few, but these, the last two I did actually, were inspired by some 16th century skeletons that were found in the catacombs in Rome. And they were sent out, they were thought to be saints or martyrs. They were sent out to lots of churches, generally in Germany and Austria, where nuns tended to bejewel them. Not only did they bejewel their faces, they dressed them in wonderful clothing, they put them in fantastic caskets, and they were revered and as miracle makers. But if you ever get a chance to see the real ones, they're absolutely stunning and they're just amazing. So I thought I'd have a go. These are replica skulls, but I wanted replica skulls that were cast from real skulls, so the jaws were separate. And once I'd attached the jaws, I replaced the teeth with some boxes of old dental teeth I'd got, and then proceeded to bejewel them with glass eyes and antique and vintage jewellery. Some of my found objects are dolls, and this particular one was called a boudoir doll from the 1920s, and they're wax. When I think about them, 100 years old, they have this incredible quality that you wouldn't get in anything new or bought. She's sitting on a nest of wax flowers that was often used by the French at weddings for adornments and bouquets. They're delicate but fantastic because they have the quality of age. And I did give her, as a sprite that she was, some real flowered wings, feathered wings. This again came about because it was a random thing. A friend of mine gave me a box of pewter sheets with some tools in there, and I've never used pewter before, certainly not any repoussé work. But I thought I'd have a go, and the first thing I did was the bull type figure in the left-hand corner, and I thought it looked a bit devilish, so that's when I thought about doing angels and demons, and it just grew from there. Like most of my work is quite unplanned and organic, and the whole thing is set in a wooden case. It was actually the base of a grandfather clock originally. I loved working in reverse because when you turn it over, you're always surprised at the effect you get. You never know what it's going to be like till you turn it back over. But with repoussé, you must remember to fill in the back because it's quite, otherwise it will dent. So there's sort of cement that sticks it to the back and fills the back so that it's quite sturdy. As I said before, and as Kirsty said, I do like found objects, and I do collect and have got boxes and boxes of tiny pieces of all sorts, and use them in mosaics. I've done quite a few of these. This is the biggest one I've done. I wanted to do a journey from land over sea to land again, to a brave new world which really doesn't exist. So I got everything out, and I picked out things that I would like to have used and I thought was relevant. And I just worked from right to left, and I didn't plan it. It just happened that way. And at the end, if there was any gaps, I filled them in with beads. So what you've got, that red hand is from a Christmas cracker, and the rays of the sun are actually from, they're from an old fan. There's Chinese checkers in there, there's shells, there's little tiny plastic toys, there's toothpicks. And the best thing about this is, because you have to collect for quite a long time to get enough variety. I think that's the only thing, but I've been doing it for years. Is that it's when it evolves and when it moves across, and you can see the things that go together, and it makes a whole. And I was really pleased with this one. The other thing I do like is crates, simply because they provide a stage, really. They've got a good depth to them. The old ones, particularly this one here, has got a lovely, it's oak, I think, it's got a lovely patina to it. And I had that for a couple of years before somebody actually gave me the horse's head. And that was from an old rocking horse. And I suddenly thought, well, I'll do a horse box, as it were. And I bought the legs and decided to do Alice in Wonderland inside, sort of scene from Alice in Wonderland. And so it's populated by little figures, all related to Alice in Wonderland. And then you've got a little box at the top that's got some pipe cleaner figures in, and they're actually watching a play, as it were. And crates, like this is another crate. And crates are also quite cheap as well. So I'm not a good carpenter. I'm not very good at making boxes. And so I use things that would suit the purpose, but are actually already used for something else. And this was a Regency room, sort of Regency feel room, I suppose. I used my pipe cleaner people again. And there's Death there playing on the piano. And all my work has a narrative. And sometimes I know what the narrative is. Sometimes the viewer makes their own narrative up. But that's what I think is quite fascinating for me. I sometimes talk to people and see what they see in it, as opposed to what I see in it, really. And I think anyone, the thing is about my work as well, I think anyone can have a go at these things. It's about a combination of putting things together, and it's not, as some art is, quite expensive to do, as I've found. These two, again, were in, I put them in boxes, and I wanted to create a sense of unease, foreboding, really. And I've used, for this particular scene, I've cut out from old books, which I love old prints because the printing quality is totally different to a modern print. The colours are different, the dots are different. I cut them out, back them in cardboard, and I made two sort of like theatre sets in two little boxes. And again, it's got a narrative. I know what it is, and I think it's people love to look into it and see what they see. But as long as it conveys a sense, which I think it does, of foreboding, and it's actually called Something Scary This Way Comes. For some reason I'm going backwards. This one again is a diorama with that type of unease, and it was actually, I'm not sure whether I wrote the poem first or did the diorama first. I think I did the diorama first, and then I wrote a poem, and it's called Tea on the Lawn with People Who Are Not What They Seem. And for this, I used an old Victorian painting that, again, I'd had for quite a few years, actually. Very, very dark, very dirty. And I just overpainted it. I put the figures in the window and the door, and reworked the sky. And I picked up this old sort of balustrade, bits of wood from a box of junk, really. I picked it up from, and there was a tiny cup that I knocked over and spilt the tea, which if you knew the poem, you'd know that happens in the end. And it's just about giving that sense of foreboding and what's going to happen next. And I do sincerely believe you can't really do that unless you've got these objects that have a history to go with it. And that's why I love them. These are about resilience. I actually was given quite a big box of These are very small cups, miniature cups that were all broken. And the guy said, "Do you want them?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I'll have them, because don't throw them away. They're very useful." And the little doll, which is about 2 inches tall, I suppose, I accidentally broke myself, but I thought it fitted in really well with a broken but not defeated theme that I had. And it is about resilience, and anyone who's been through any trauma or any type of problems in their life, if you haven't got resilience, then I'm afraid it's far more difficult to get over these things. And I think, I mean, I might be biased, but I think women do have a certain resilience inbuilt in them. And I think they need it sometimes too. On the right is actually, again, I used a boudoir doll. The dress is made from an old umbrella, which was really rusty, but the material was fantastic. And it fitted in with the theme of someone being trapped. And I've actually used a little chain around her ankle attached to the frame. In fact, this is in a domed frame that used to house a crucifix. It's a French frame. And the actual material of a dress is caught in the frame, in the glass. It was very difficult to photograph with the glass on, so that's why it's photographed like this. But again, it's a theme about being trapped and resilience and trying to escape and trying to be free, really, which is a theme I'm interested in, because freedom is so rare. Real freedom is incredibly rare. But it's a freedom of mind as well as a freedom of body. I put these on because they show that you can use all sorts of things to paint on, and it doesn't necessarily have to cost a lot of money. And the Don't Eat Flies is actually a base of a Victorian dome, and it's got its own inbuilt frame. And I love circular pictures anyway. But this was actually really influenced by the start of the pandemic, when it was thought that the virus was contracted and passed on by animals that shouldn't have been eaten in the wet market in China. And it just reminded me of, was an old woman who swallowed a fly. And so I decided to do the nursery rhyme and call it Don't Eat Flies. Actually, I did the spider, fly, bird, cat and dog, but I didn't have room for the horse and the cow, or the cow and the horse. And then the one top right is actually a breadboard, and it's called Only the Man in the Moon Knows What's Going On. And when I've got lots of these boards, and I didn't really know. I knew I wanted to do Man in the Moon, but I didn't know how I was going to do it. So I just painted it a light colour. Then I painted it orange because it's one of my favourite colours. And I just started to scratch off figures. I gave him 2 eyes and a mouth. And I changed the one eye to an elephant because I think, to me, it's a symbol of lots of things. It's a symbol of history and not forgetting and reliability and all sorts of things. And it's the first time I've actually used graffito in that way, and I enjoyed doing that one. And this one is made with air dried clay and Milliput, and it was just an old picture frame that was deep enough to actually hold it. And it was some leftover bits from actually Kirsty's Petri dish project, which I used the clay as bits of planet in that. And I'd got these bits left over, and I've made the Milliput lady. And it's called Balancing Act, and it's about balancing all the things in your life that can pull you one way and the other, whether it be family or work or what have you. And we all do a balancing act of some description. There's a few more dioramas. One on the left, I actually was quite proud of this one because I think it was everything it says on the tin, as it were. And it was in response to an open call for works that had the feelings of 2020. And I tried to, in it, it's called Lockdown Dream, and in it it's about everything that I felt, and I'm sure other people felt, at the start of the original lockdown and the pandemic. And it's incorporated, I think, another pipe cleaner figure, got loads of them, and it's got collage, it's got cutouts, it's got a door, and in it I try to get the anxiety, the fear, the actual reference to a plague, the fact that you're trapped and you don't know what's going to happen. And I think it worked out quite well. I was quite pleased with that one. And then I did a series of Circus Dioramas, mainly because I bought a huge box of 1950s circus figures. They were all clowns doing all different things with horses. And I'd got an old galleon, and I thought, well, the sails from the galleon would be quite good as a canvas for the tent. And again, you couldn't use new canvas. You can't paint a canvas with that age. It's just doesn't happen. And what I loved best was painting the faces in the crowd, which you probably can't see, but I love doing them. They have all got all sorts of expressions on. And again, they have narratives, and some of them have stories to go with them. So recently I've gone back to painting on canvas, which I haven't done for quite a while. The one on the left was again in response to an open call for 50 Shades of Red. And obviously it's red. It's called Coming Up for Air, and it's again about trying to escape, whether it be your past or commitments or responsibilities, or it's just trying to take a breath and things with everything else holding you back, really. And I thoroughly enjoyed doing that one. What I like about acrylics and what I don't like about acrylics is that they're transparent. What I like about, because they're transparent, you can build it up in layers, but which is a good thing, but it takes an awfully long time to get a depth with an acrylic. So that's the bad thing about it. Obviously, it dries very quickly, but I am going to try oils, something I haven't done for a very, very long time, just to see if I can get a better depth of colour with oils. The one on the right, I've got these odd little canvases. They're only quite small, these. They're not big at all. And I just like yellow, started doing yellow, and then a figure appeared all of a sudden on a stripy towel. And when I'd done it, it actually reminded me of Princess Latifa. And immediately I thought about freedom again, and how we in this country are actually incredibly, we're gifted that we are free, particularly the women in this country. And there are women all around the world that actually aren't free at all, in many sense, in many sense, and they're often the ones that are victimised. It wasn't intended to be that. I just thought at the end, that's what came to me, really. And these are the miniatures. I did a few miniatures in response to the Doll's House galleries that have sprung up everywhere. I think they're fascinating. It's a fantastic idea. And there's one that does it with little people and private views. And you might know, I've got a few dolls' houses. They all look like Bates Motel, and they're all a bit weird. Because I did vision. I had a vision one day doing an exhibition where there was a whole street of these very old, decrepit dolls' houses, and you had to look in the window to see what was going on, and every house would have a story to it, and it would all be, a bit off kilter, a bit strange. And I'd got these odd bits of wood. I think the yellow, which is the bottom one, was the lid off an old tea caddy, I think, and empty, which is the top, which is actually about women who can't, either through the menopause or other reasons, actually can't have children. That was just the back of an old picture frame. They're about 4 inches on the longest side there. Now this is a little video, and I've included this because it's in February. An artist called Stephen Chapman, and as some of you may have heard, it was called What the February, and every day you had a challenge. And the best bit about it was you had to do it in that day, because the next day in the morning at 10 o'clock, you had another challenge, which was great because you had to work quickly and you had to be on the ball really to do it. You didn't have to do it every day. There's a few I missed out. I didn't do the videos because that involved videoing yourself, and I'm not that keen of doing that. This was about dyslexia and moving beyond words, I think the actual site is called. And I'd got this bit of plasticine and made some lips, and it's very short, and it's just about things you do with your lips, really, apart from talk. And I put that in simply because it's so interesting when you're asked to do that. I would never have done that ever if I hadn't have had that challenge to think about. And I just looked around the room and thought, oh, well, I've got some red plasticine, let's do some lips. For me, it's a great way of working. Other people might find it really weird, but I think for me, it works well. And now I'll come on to the human mind exhibition pieces, which are all pen on paper mostly, some mostly with Sharpies, some with watercolour. I like to use good watercolour paper with pens and Sharpies because you get a wonderful soft edge. And like acrylics, Sharpies can be transparent, so it's like tissue paper, plain tissue paper. You get some fantastic colours using them. The first one is isolation, which is pen on watercolour paper. And I try to convey the feeling of, an outsider. You can be isolated mentally or physically. And whether it's someone looking in or someone looking out, or feeling that they don't belong, for whatever reason that you feel isolated, it's an awful condition to be in. And I try to use words in the background like normal and abnormal and sane and mad and fake and true. And it's things that people get labelled sometimes, whereas in fact no one should be labelled anything, because there is no normal. And it's about accepting the fact that you need help if you do feel like an outsider. This is dreams. This again was pen on watercolour paper. I actually cut out my own drawings and collage them onto black paper because I wanted a completely flat black background. And I quite often use brains that are open, if you know what I mean, because I like to put, your brain is full of all sorts of things all the time. And dreams are supposed to sort this out. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. Nobody really knows much about dreams. I dream quite a lot, mostly in the morning. And so I try to portray a feeling of, there's lots of things going bodily in the brain. And the ginger cat in the dream pulls it out of your body, and because that's where it comes from. Everything that you dream about is in you somewhere, and there's a reason why you dream about it. I don't know, but they're fascinating things. And if you've noticed, I've done her awake and not asleep. And that's because when you do dream, you are awake to all intents and purposes. I've even had dreams, and loads of you must have done too, where you wake up, and then after a while you realise that actually you're not awake, you're still in the dream. And that's actually pretty frightening. It's happened to me a few times. This is about self-awareness. Again, it was watercolour and pen on paper. And I wanted to, really, I try to convey the fact that you really need to know yourself in many ways in order to communicate and live in a world with other people, really. And self-awareness is key. It's very difficult because you have to really look at yourself in a critical way sometimes. And again, I put chaos behind the face, because quite often that's what we feel. You can have a very calm face, but behind it is just chaos and anxiety and worry. And so it's about looking at yourself. It's about realizing how you affect other people and how other people affect you, and recognizing all this. And hopefully it helps you get by doing so. This one's confusion, again, pen and acrylic on watercolour paper, and it's one of my favourites actually, because I think it does what it says on the tin again. I've tried to use the brain again, full of all sorts of things, because to me, a brain is a very sophisticated computer, but it's your essence. It's what you are, and people who are confused, it's because the brain can't straighten itself out. It's a bit like having a virus on a computer. I think it's like something goes wrong, the connections don't work, and not only, you know, if you're confused for whatever reason, certainly if you've got like the elderly with dementia, something's out of kilter, and the brain doesn't match up. It doesn't fit the world, and you don't fit the world, and that's why I think it's confusion is an awful place to be. I often think my mother had Alzheimer's, and I often think you never know what people think who've got this. You don't know how they see the world. I just know that she didn't see it in the way I did at all, and because of that, she was very frightened. She was very anxious. So the brain churns it all up and spits it out in a different way than what we know, really. Again, I hope it conveys that. And the last one of the 5 is hope. And I tried to do an overall more calming picture for this one. And I love that colour blue, and so I painted that first. And this is about support and communication. Again, I've shown what people are thinking, or I've tried to, and I've used collage, particularly the flowers. I always think of flowers as being a symbol of caring for people, and particularly he's got flowers in his eye, which is a he, in his eyes and his ears, and that's about seeing somebody, and it's about hearing somebody, and it's about knowing that somebody's there for you, really. And again, that's what I hoped would come out of this one. The last thing I'm going to show you is another little animation that's got a story to it. I suffer from insomnia, and it's connected to human mind in a way. I suppose anyone out there who's had insomnia will recognise this, because it makes you angry. It makes you angry when you can't sleep, angry with yourself, because your brain keeps talking to you, and you're full of all sorts of things that you can't get rid of. And so I did write a spoken word poem called Insomnia at the beginning of lockdown, in response to a call from the Theatre Lab in London, who wanted performances and stories about the lockdown. I sent it in, they liked it, and then because the lockdown went on so long, and then there was another lockdown, they decided not to do it as a real festival, but as a virtual festival, and they wanted you to send in videos. Well, I'm not very good on screen. I mean, I'm not a particularly good speaker. I don't look particularly wonderful. So I decided to do a little, I can't call it an animation, but it is pictures that I've drawn myself, because I love illustration, and I do quite a few illustrations. And then I voiced over. But when I voiced over the once, it didn't have it didn't have the oomph that I wanted it to have. So I did a double take with an echo, and I thought it added to the feeling of what it's like to have insomnia. And I'll play it and see what you think.
It's 2 a.m. Don't worry, they said. Daily updates, confusing Mondays, they pervade, invade my thoughts, they crash around, rebound and vibrate in my head. A ceaseless form of hell. I even yell, shut up to myself. Shut up. But I don't listen. 4 a.m. Clock on the bridge chimes. A minute later the church bell rings. Never together they measure time. Cement my sleep, my status. 60 seconds to the minute. 60 minutes to the hour. 60 hours is 2.5 days. Count the ways, 1,680 hours lost. Sleep may dissolve, absolve me from dreams that might count the cost of an endless night. Can I lie, sigh, turn, return to where I started? 6 a.m. Light seeps through the window. Cue the spotlight, the glow. Birds enter centre stage, put on a show, tweeting, no hidden agenda, just calling out the dawn. I yawn, rub my eyes. Do they sleep, the birds? Do they relish the silence in the air because we're not there? I ache. Shall I stir? Move? Pretend to be awake, to feel all right? Shall I absorb the sunlight? Sit upright? Shall I absorb the sunlight? Unwind, be kind to myself? Be kind to myself. Pull the duvet over my eyes. Too early to rise and nowhere to go. 8 a.m. One leg out. 8 a.m. Both legs out. Lift yourself. Groan. Walk like a Neanderthal to the kitchen. Put the toast on. Look at the phone. Message someone. Stay safe is the new goodbye. Answer a message. Are you okay? Answer a message. Me. Are you okay? Fine, I reply. Me. Fine, I reply.
And that's it. That's my little finished.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Wow. It gives you so many different materials and ideas, and it's all quirky, and I really, really enjoyed this.
Thank you very much. And I mean, I would like to get it out there in a way that it's, I think for me, and it's not for everybody, but the more you explore, the more you do things that are out of your comfort zone, if you like, the more you learn and the better you become as an artist. It's not for everybody. Some people are not interested. You know, portrait painters, for instance, they paint portraits, and there's very little else you can do with that really if you paint portraits. But I do think if you experiment with materials, with ways of working, and you expand your creativity, like the writing for me has been a revelation in the past 18 months. I used to write poems, but nowhere near as much as I've done so in these past 18 months. And it goes together. You can illustrate them, you can do little films to them. It's endless, really, possibilities, I think.
I completely agree with that. What would you say your favourite medium is? What was your favourite piece of art that you've ever created?
Oh.
Big question.
It is a big question because they're all so different. I did like the Lockdown Dream. It was one that came together very well, and I love my circuses, but there's so many things I've done over the years. But I think probably my dioramas are my favourites in many ways, particularly the ones that have a sense of the unease. And I mean, I do like painting, but again, it's two-dimensional, obviously. And whilst I've enjoyed doing them, I think for me, 3 dimensions, or at least the sense of 3 dimensions, like theatre to me is also incredibly interesting, and theatre design. And I think that for me is my favourite side of it. But if I can combine them, which I do, you know, if I can combine them with, I'm trying to do a book of poetry with illustrations at the moment, but of course when you think about books, it's an awful lot of pages, it's an awful lot of poems, so you can't just do like 5 poems in a book. So it'd probably be ready in about 5 years' time if I'm still alive by then. But I just think it's as an artist, as any artist wants to do, they want to express themselves, and if you express yourself, for me, I express myself in many different ways, and it's important to me. But other artists would express themselves differently, and there is no right and wrong in it, as you know. There's never been a right and wrong in art. It's just what comes out of your brain, really. And I think brain's fascinating. It's a fascinating organ because why are some people even good at art? I mean, why are some people good at singing? Why are some people brilliant musicians? It's fascinating to me, and it's fascinating how it works. And that's why when it goes wrong, it's just awful, really, tragic.
It's true. And it's really interesting how a lot of your artwork is really delving into what are we thinking and how does our brains actually work, from sleeping to mental health, to even just making quirky little things and seeing what the audience thinks and reacts to them. It's a really interesting way to go about art, and it's fun, and it's really showing how diverse and amazing you are as a person, as well as what your artwork is.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I don't feel amazing, but I often think I should write my life story as well. I have had an interesting life in many ways, and that has helped, because you're very young, and when you're my age, you would have had a lot more experiences, and whichever experience you have, you learn from, whether it's be a bad one or a good one. And I think as time goes on, those experiences, they're all there and they're all ready to come out, and it makes you a rounder person. And I can't emphasize that enough. You know, it's so, and that's why I think artists do grow as they get older. They grow in what they do and what they want to do and what they want to explore, because they have different experiences along the way.
Yeah, that's so true. And I really liked what you did with the end video, insomnia. As someone who keeps going in and out of dealing with it, it really does hit the nail on the head. And I think a lot of your artwork does that. It really portrays well what you want to say, whatever it is that you want to say when you make it.
I hope it does. And particularly, you see, the thing is, if I didn't suffer from insomnia, I probably couldn't have done that. But because I know what it's like, and it's probably one of the worst things I experience in some ways. It's not in the sense of you know, like being really ill or getting COVID or anything, but in the sense of you're so angry with yourself that you can't sleep, and so your brain starts up, you can't stop it. You try to stop it, but you can't stop it. And then I do live in a place where there's a clock on the bridge, so not only can you not sleep, you time it, because it times every hour. So you know, and it's not so bad now because I've retired, but when I was working, and I sort of had to get up about 10 to 5 or something, and once I heard it go to 4 o'clock, I thought, well, do you know what, I might as well just get up now. And it's it's just and I haven't worked out how to really, once, if I know some nights when I'm going to have insomnia, I know what's going to be like, and I haven't worked out how to stop it. I haven't worked out how to. I've tried all the relaxation techniques, all the breathing, all everything they say, and nothing works, because my brain's going 10 to the dozen, and I really don't know how to stop that.
Yeah, it's such a massive problem with insomnia, just figuring out how to make your brain stop. But in a sense, it's working well for your artwork, because you're always thinking, you're always making such really interesting and original things.
Thank you.
Yeah, they're just amazing to look at. You put across the feelings and the history of the objects. I think that's what I really like about your dioramas, choosing the objects that have history rather than just a brand new one, and you're rather than imposing a history on it, it's got its actual history. Yeah.
I mean, toys are amazing. Old toys, they have a visible history because they've been played with, but some of the old toys I've got, which they don't date back to like 1850 or anything, but probably 19th century, early 20th century, up until about 1920. They have, you look at them and you think, well, how could children like this? Some of them are so strange. They are very, very strange. I've got a whole cabinet full of puppets and puppet heads, and some of them would scare anybody. How children play with them. But of course, the more they're worn as well, they're eaten, and they've got all the paint scraped off, and that's what gives them the life, really. And there's nothing like old toys to do that. I don't think they're just brilliant, most of them.
It's true, and they're just such interesting objects in themselves, and they bring a lot of interest into the 3D, collage dioramas. And yeah, the artworks that you put into the exhibition, I think they were some of my favourite because they're so surreal and put into perspective a lot of what people are actually somewhat feeling in lockdown, especially the dreams one. I've had quite a few people send comments that from the lockdown they've had such weird dreams, and that the illustration that you've made, it really, really shows what people have actually been thinking and dreaming.
Yeah, it's weird dreams. I've always had lots of strange dreams. In fact, when I was a child, I had sort of abstract dreams. They were very strange, and they and I remember them, and I'm going back a long time, so I might remember them wrong, as being coloured. And I remember now, I can't remember if my dreams have got colour or not. Can you? do you have? I think you think you know until you think about it. You think, are they black and white or are they colour? I have no idea.
Yeah.
And you wake up and you think, I don't really know. But I was convinced when I was a child that they did have colour to them, and I could be wrong. But they're just fascinating. Again, it's the brain. It's a weird, nobody understands how it works, really. And they couldn't build a computer to match it because it's your essence. It's what you are. And dreams, things come out in dreams that you can't possibly understand, but they must be in there to come out in the first place. So
it's true. People try and put so much meaning to dreams because surely they have to mean something. I used to remember as a kid, I would wake up. Well, I'd have a dream, and I'd think that I was out of my body and looking into the room around me, and I could see myself. I mean, as I get older, I'm realizing that they were just dreams. I didn't have that ability. But it's fascinating what manifesting dreams and the meanings people put behind it, and whether they're true or not.
I often wonder how they, how anybody gets, you only read books on them, don't you? And I think, well, how do they know that? Why do they think that means that? I think when your teeth drop out, it means something, and all this sort of stuff. And I had a dream this morning actually, and it had my two brothers in it, and they're never in a dream that I've had. And it was about being in a pub somewhere, and there was a dance going on, and that's why I thought of my brothers. Why were they there? Because that's not normal, and I don't know what that means at all. Perhaps I was thinking about them. I don't. It's fascinating. If anybody could work out dreams, we'd all be a lot better off. Your brain obviously knows what it's doing. That's all I can say.
I guess that's all that matters, as long as your brain knows what's happening.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, it doesn't. Sometimes it goes awry and it doesn't know what's going on, but hopefully that won't happen to us. But it's everything to do with the human mind, and in fact the human body with anatomy and biology fascinates me no end. I mean, the years I spent in an operating theatre I loved it. It was fascinating. It was you felt as though you're doing something good as well, obviously. But what you learned from that, not just about the human body, but how it reacts to things and how it mends itself, and all the instruments that you use in an operating theatre and all the technical stuff that nobody really knows about. It was a great time. So and again, that aided what I was interested in. And there was a phase when I did a lot to do with bones. I've got a cabinet behind me full of bones. And natural history, as the Victorians used to love it. It was a learning curve, and I still find it fascinating.
We've just got a question from the audience. Why did you choose to become an artist?
Why did I do what? Sorry.
And why did you choose to become an artist?
from probably the age of about, well, from way back, I loved painting, and every Christmas I used to have paints as presents. And one Christmas I had an easel, which was wonderful, but I always wanted to paint, and so did my brother. I had two brothers. The next brother up painted. He built a shed in the garden as a little studio, and we both used it. My dad loved art as well, and as I grew older, there was the only thing I ever wanted to do was go to art college, and the only thing that would have swayed me from that was to go into microbiology, which I was also really fascinated with. And I love biology as well because of all the diagrams you did at school. But no, I always wanted to paint. I always felt better when I painted. It's an incredibly good therapy. And the only other thing that I did to a great extent was read books. I read books and painted for hours and hours and hours on end. I had a little box room at home, and it smelt of oil paint all the time. I'm sure it wasn't very good for you to sleep in it, but I loved it. I never wanted to do anything else, never. And the best thing for me was going to foundation. You know, you go to foundation before you go to do your well, it was a diploma in my day, a BA, and I went to the foundation course wanting to be a painter. But because on the foundation course you do lots of different disciplines, we did printmaking, we did ceramics, we did graphics. I ended up wanting to do sculpture, and that was because I was presented with all these things to try. And so I went to art college and did sculpture in the end, and it was just eye-opening to me. It was fantastic, and I loved it. I loved the people, and I think you get a lot from peers and other artists. And it was a great time to go to art college as well, because it was much freer then. You didn't have to prove or plan or, you know, talk for hours about deep meanings to things. You didn't have to do that. As long as they thought you were producing worth, you were moving on and evolving, you were okay. And I loved it every minute.
Yeah, that's great. That I mean, that structure is amazing, and it would be great to have it implemented now, rather than having to tick boxes and having to explain every single thing you do.
The difference is because now it's a business. When I went, you see, it was everything was free. There was no fees. The years were very small. I think it was 15 in my year. And the difference there is that because there was no fees, if you didn't cut the mustard, as it were, you got thrown out. So I was on probation. I was on probation once. My friend was on probation and she actually had to go. They told us to leave because they thought she wasn't progressing. So there's pros and cons to both. So you really had to work hard to stop there, and you really had to do a lot. There's a lot of self-discipline because it was all in your head. You still had to say what you were doing, what you were aiming for, you know, all that sort of stuff. But it wasn't as formal as it is today, and you because of that, every single person in my year did something different. You could walk into the end of year show and it would be there'd be conventional sculpture, there'd be conceptual art, there'd be installations. I don't think that happens today so much. I think you go to the year show and it tends to have a lot of similar themes going through it. You know, that's just my opinion. I'm just glad I went when I did go, and because I did feel free. It was a sense of freedom, but you also had to have that incredible self-discipline, because otherwise you just were out on your ear, basically.
Wow, I mean, you've had such a fascinating life, and it's created such fascinating artworks. And I'd like to say a massive thank you for doing this artist talk today, and thank you so much for being a part of the Human Mind exhibition. You've helped make it interesting and diverse, and just absolutely fantastic to put on for the public.
Well, thank you very much, Kirsty. Thanks for letting me spout for a few minutes. It's a new thing for me as well, but I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
That's good. And if any of the audience enjoyed it tonight, this will also be uploaded into YouTube. And there are more artist talks running this week. We have one tomorrow and the final one on Thursday evening. So yeah, make sure to follow on Instagram, Facebook, subscribe to YouTube channel to keep up to date with everything we're doing. And follow Yvette on Instagram. It's Curious Creations, isn't it?
Gosh, I think of myself. Creative Curiosities.
Yes, that.
It's called Creative Curiosities because actually I used to have a shop called Secret Room, and it was a bit, I did artwork, but I also sold other things, and that's where the Creative Curiosities came from. But yes, it's creative_curiosities.
Brilliant. Yes, everyone follow Yvette. Fascinating artwork. We'll be there. You won't be disappointed.
Well, thank you, Kirsty.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
So I'll see you soon, and I'll keep in touch.
Okay, bye-bye.
Brilliant. Bye.